My name is Amelia, and I am 42 years old. My world is one of patient, reverent silence, measured not in the frantic pace of the modern world, but in the gentle, rhythmic tick of a balance wheel and the sacred scent of fine oil and old brass. I am a horologist, a master restorer of antique timepieces. My workshop is a sanctuary, a quiet haven where dust motes dance like tiny nebulae in the focused shafts of light from my bench lamps. Here, I don't just fix watches, I resurrect history. I can take a rusted, forgotten mechanism, a heart that has been silent for 200 years, and coax it back into beating again. My work is a devout tribute to precision, authenticity, and the true, unaltered passage of time. Each gear I polish, each jewel I set, is a verse in a hymn to an unshakable, mechanical truth. My husband, Sebastian, lives in a different time zone altogether. His is the dazzling, accelerated world of luxury branding, a world where truth is not a fixed point on a dial, but a story to be told, a narrative to be shaped and sold. He is a modern-day alchemist, transforming common objects into coveted treasures through the sheer power of story. He can take a simple pen, a leather briefcase, and weave a history around it so compelling, so imbued with prestige and desire, that its value multiplies 100-fold. He was the brilliant, charismatic face of our life. I was its quiet, intricate movement, the unseen engine that gave it all meaning. He admired my work with a sort of fascinated awe, as a man of faith might admire a scientist. "You're my anchor in time, Amelia," he would say, his voice a low, sincere murmur as he watched me through a loop, my hands steady as I worked on a centuries-old gear train. "While I'm out there selling dreams, you're here, preserving the truth. You keep me real." I believed him with every fiber of my being. I thought our love was like the escapement mechanism of a grand complication, a perfect, symbiotic transfer of energy, each part essential to the other, creating a beautiful and reliable whole. He was the mainspring, full of coiled potential energy and ambition. I was the balance wheel, providing the steady, regulating rhythm of reality that gave his ventures their integrity. The first sign that the mechanism was failing was a subtle change in pressure, a tension I could feel in the air of our home but could not yet see on the dial. Sebastian's branding agency had lost a major client, a catastrophic financial blow he tried to downplay with forced, brittle smiles and an exhausting parade of late nights in his locked office. I heard the hushed, urgent tones of his phone calls through the heavy oak door, the frustrated sighs that bled into the quiet of the house. The easy confidence that had once radiated from him was replaced by a high-strung, frantic energy, the buzzing of a machine pushed far beyond its limits, its components vibrating with stress. Then, one evening, he came into my workshop, breaking the sacred silence. His face was alight with a feverish, triumphant glow that seemed almost unnatural, too bright. In his hands, he carried a small, antique rosewood box, its surface scarred with the dignity of age, a map of its own long history. "I've found it, Amelia," he whispered, his voice trembling with a manufactured reverence that I, in my naive love, would only recognize in hindsight. The Holy Grail. The lost Chronos Eterna. My breath caught in my throat, a tiny hitch in my own internal clock. The Chronos Eterna was a myth, a legend whispered among horologists with the same hushed awe that physicists reserve for a unified field theory. Created by a reclusive 18th-century genius, a man named Alistair Finch who was said to be half madman, half prophet, it supposedly contained a unique complication, a celestial resonant escapement, a mechanism so impossibly advanced that no one had ever been able to replicate it. It was a watch that supposedly kept perfect time not with the flawed rotation of the sun, but with the distant, silent pulse of a specific star in the Lyra constellation. It was poetry made mechanical. A private estate sale in Geneva, Sebastian explained, his story flowing flawlessly, a perfectly polished narrative he had clearly rehearsed. An old, aristocratic family, on the verge of ruin. The watch has been sitting in a vault, unseen, for 200 years. It's not working. The celestial complication is incomplete. It seems someone tried to repair it a century ago, a clumsy butcher who lost a key component, a piece of the machine's very soul. He opened the box. Lying on a bed of faded, threadbare velvet was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The gold case was warm and heavy, the enamel dial intricately painted with a map of the night sky as seen from 18th-century London. But as a master, my eyes looked past the beauty to the silence. Its heart was still. The soul of the machine was gone. "The estate will only sell it if it can be proven authentic," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, his gaze intense and pleading. "And that means it has to run. The complication has to be completed. Amelia, only you can do this. Only your hands can understand Finch's genius. Only you can resurrect this miracle and bring the legend back to life. This will be our legacy. The story of a lifetime." For the next 2 months, the Chronos Eterna became my obsession, my religion. It was the most complex and beautiful puzzle of my career. I lived and breathed Finch's genius, sleeping for only a few hours a night, my dreams filled with the ghosts of gears and levers. I felt as if I were in a silent conversation with a mind from another century. But as I worked, tiny, discordant details began to surface, like faint scratches on a perfect crystal, anomalies that my trained eye could not ignore. Under high magnification, I saw that the patina on the brass plates, the delicate aging that should be a unique fingerprint of time, was almost too perfect, too uniform, like a watercolor wash rather than the chaotic artistry of centuries. I noticed microscopic tooling marks on a bridge that seemed inconsistent with 18th century techniques, bearing the signature of a modern, computer-guided lathe. A jewel setting, meant to be a hand-cut natural ruby, was instead a flawless synthetic, a material not perfected until 100 years after the watch was supposedly made. I dismissed them. I explained them away as the eccentricities of a forgotten genius, the strange anomalies that made the piece unique. My desire for the legend to be real, my need for Sebastian's story to be true, was a powerful, blinding force. The moment the world fractured, the moment time itself seemed to stop, was when I was studying the original maker's schematics in a rare archival book, a heavy, leather-bound volume I'd had specially shipped from a library in Zurich. In a faded footnote, written in a spidery, almost illegible hand, a single sentence described Finch's secret signature, a mark of authenticity known to only a handful of scholars in the world, a microscopic engraving of the constellation Lyra, hidden on the underside of the mainspring barrel. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a wild, erratic beat. My hands, which had been so steady for months, now trembled with a dreadful certainty. I carefully disassembled the watch, the familiar components now feeling alien and menacing. I placed the mainspring barrel under my most powerful electron microscope. I scanned every millimeter of the polished surface, my breath held tight in my chest. There was no Lyra. There was nothing but the cold, empty, soulless gleam of polished brass. It wasn't a quirk. It was a lie. The watch was a forgery. A breathtaking, magnificent, near-perfect forgery that had been crafted to fool everyone. Everyone, except the one person in the world who could give it its final, damning seal of approval. The blood drained from my face. I stumbled out of my workshop and into Sebastian's office, feeling a desperate, primal need to tell him, to share in the heartbreak of this beautiful, intricate lie. He wasn't there, but his laptop was open, its screen glowing in the dim light. And on the screen was an email chain with a name I recognized with a jolt of pure ice, a notorious, shadowy figure in the art world known only as the Dutchman, a master forger whose name was a curse whispered in the back rooms of auction houses. The email I read was not about a discovery. It was an invoice, a ledger of deceit. It detailed costs for historical patination, custom tooling, and provenance fabrication. The final line made my soul turn to ice and shatter into a million irreparable pieces. The celestial complication is beyond my skill. As discussed, the final component must be fabricated and installed by your wife. Her hands, her reputation, her very soul, are the only things in the world that can give this piece its final, unimpeachable authenticity. Once she has done her work, our beautiful lie becomes the truth. He hadn't discovered a forgery. He had commissioned one. He had brought this lie to me not to restore, but to complete. He was using my skill, my integrity, my life's devotion to truth, as the final, authenticating stamp on his grand deception. I wasn't his anchor in time. I was the ghost in his machine, the unwitting soul he was building into a soulless, monstrous creation. The ticking of the clocks in my workshop, once a soothing chorus of life, now sounded like a countdown to an execution. The grief was a physical weight, a mainspring wound so tight it felt like it would shatter my bones. He had not just betrayed me, he had made my sacred craft an accomplice to his crime. He had turned my sanctuary into a criminal enterprise. But the grief, like all energy in a closed system, did not vanish. It transformed. Over the next 48 hours of sleepless, chilling clarity, it cooled and hardened into the cold, precise anger of a master artisan whose tools had been defiled. He needed me to build the heart of the celestial complication. He believed my love for the art, and for him, would make me do it blindly. He was right about the first part. I would build it. I would pour every ounce of my skill and genius into it. It would be the most exquisite piece of work I had ever created. But it would not be a heart. It would be a Trojan horse, crafted from brass and steel, a perfect, beautiful harbinger of his doom. My plan was one of intricate, silent vengeance, a plot that could only have been conceived by a watchmaker. I would create the missing component perfectly. It would be a masterpiece of horology, a flawless recreation of Finch's theoretical genius that would pass the scrutiny of any expert in the world. But I would build a secret into its very atoms. I would construct a key bridge within the mechanism not from a single metal, but from a microscopic, laminated bimetallic strip, a sandwich of two metals with vastly different properties of thermal and sonic expansion. To the naked eye, even under a loupe, it would be invisible, indistinguishable from solid brass. This strip was designed with a specific, fatal flaw. It would remain perfectly stable under all normal conditions of temperature and pressure. But if exposed to a specific, high-frequency sonic resonance, a sound wave pitched at precisely 37.5 kHz, a frequency far beyond the range of human hearing, it would vibrate and warp by a single, critical micron. That tiny, imperceptible warp would be enough to push a lever that would instantly and permanently seize the entire gear train, shattering a microscopic jewel pivot in the process. I was building a kill switch, an assassin hidden in plain sight. First, I needed to document the crime. I meticulously copied the entire email chain with the Dutchman onto a secure, encrypted drive. I took high-resolution micro-photographs of the modern tooling marks, the synthetic jewels, the damning absence of the Lyra constellation. I was building a case, not for a courtroom, but for a very specific jury of one. My ally would be the man Sebastian planned to use as his final pawn, Mr. Elias Thorne, the world's most respected appraiser of antique timepieces. Thorne was a legend, a man in his late 70s whose word was as good as gospel in the auction world. Sebastian was counting on his unimpeachable reputation to certify the watch and send its value into the stratosphere. I requested a private meeting with Thorne in his quiet, book-lined office, a place that smelled of old paper and integrity. I laid out my evidence on his mahogany desk, the microscopic photographs, the financial records, the emails. Then, I explained my plan, the Trojan escapement. Thorne, a man of quiet dignity, listened without interruption, his face a mask of scholarly concentration. When I finished, the mask had dissolved, replaced by a pale, cold fury. "The man is not just a fraud," he said, his voice a low growl, like the grinding of old gears. "He is a vandal of history. A barbarian. He has used your beautiful, sacred gift to create a monster. Madam, I will be more than your ally. I will be your instrument." The night before the watch was to be sent to the auction house, I confronted Sebastian. He found me in my workshop, putting the final, gleaming touches on the complication. "It's finished," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a pendulum. He rushed over, his eyes gleaming with avarice as he peered through the loop. "It's perfect, Amelia. Utterly perfect. You are a genius." He pulled me into a hug, but it felt like the embrace of a cold, metallic snake. "I know what this is, Sebastian," I said quietly, pulling away. "I know about the Dutchman. I know you built this lie for me to finish." The charming mask fell away. For a single, fleeting second, I saw the panicked, hollow man beneath. But it was quickly replaced by a chillingly pragmatic arrogance, the cold logic of a man who believes his own stories. "It's not a lie," he hissed, his voice low and urgent. "It's the greatest story I've ever told. This lie will secure our future for the rest of our lives. It's a work of art, a new truth, and you, my love, were the final, brilliant brushstroke. Now, you will stay quiet. Because your name, your reputation, is just as tied to this watch as mine. If I go down, the world will say the master horologist was either a fool or a co-conspirator. He thought he had me trapped. He believed my professional pride, the very thing he had sought to exploit, would now force my silence. He had no idea that my pride was the very thing that would destroy him." "You're right," I said, a small, cold smile on my lips. "It is a work of art. And it will perform exactly as designed." He left, believing he had won, believing I was broken and compliant. He didn't understand. A master watchmaker knows that the most beautiful machines can also be the most effective, most precise instruments of destruction. The grand auction room at Sterling's was a temple of wealth and desire. The air was thick with the scent of money and the thrill of the hunt. The world's most elite collectors were gathered, their hushed whispers a symphony of anticipation. The Chronos Eterna was the final, star lot of the evening, the crowning jewel of the sale. I was not there. I was in my workshop, the silent heart of my now violated sanctuary, watching the auction's high-definition livestream. On my workbench lay a single, custom-built sonic resonance generator, a simple black box with a single, glowing red button. The watch was presented on a velvet cushion under a cone of brilliant light, its beautifully restored face projected onto a massive screen behind the auctioneer. It was ticking, the elegant sweep of the second hand a testament to my flawless, deceitful work. The sound of its heartbeat, my creation, was amplified through the room's sound system, a steady, confident rhythm of a lie. Sebastian sat in the front row, the very picture of a triumphant connoisseur, a man at the peak of his story. As promised, Elias Thorne was invited on stage to give his final, authoritative appraisal before the bidding began. He approached the podium with the slow, dignified gait of a man who carried the weight of history on his shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne began, his voice resonating with a lifetime of authority. "I have examined this piece with the full weight of my 50 years of experience. I have studied its movement, its provenance, its soul. It is, without question, the lost masterpiece of Alistair Finch." Sebastian beamed, a wave of relief and triumph washing over his face. The bidding began. It was a ferocious, dizzying battle of egos and fortunes, a storm of numbers that climbed into the stratosphere. 5 million. 10. 15. Sebastian's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. The bidding finally slowed, the auctioneer's gavel raised like a judge's sentence. Sold. He was about to cry, for $22 million to the bidder on the phone. At that exact moment, on stage, Elias Thorne held up a hand. "One final check, if I may," he said to the auctioneer, his voice calm and commanding. "I am running a small diagnostic, a resonance test to check the harmonic frequency of the movement, a new technique to verify the integrity of the metals." He took out his phone and tapped the screen. In my workshop, I received a text from him, a single, pulsating word. "Now." My hand, steady as a surgeon's, moved to the black box. I pressed the glowing red button. On the massive screen in the auction hall, the entire world watched it happen. The elegant, sweeping second hand of the Chronos Eterna stuttered. It trembled for a single, agonizing second, like a dying heart. And then, it stopped. The watch was dead. A collective, stunned gasp sucked the air out of the room. The amplified ticking sound was replaced by an abrupt, deafening silence. Elias Thorne leaned into the microphone, his face a mask of cold, theatrical disappointment. His voice was clear as a bell, each word a perfectly placed hammer blow. "It appears," he announced to the silent, horrified room, "that this masterpiece has a fatal, hidden flaw. A flaw, I have discovered after extensive analysis, that could only exist if this watch were not a restored original, but a modern, fraudulent creation. A forgery." He turned and looked directly at Sebastian, whose face had collapsed into a grotesque mask of disbelief and pure, animal terror. "This auction is a fraud," Thorne declared, his voice ringing with the finality of a bell toll. "And the man who perpetrated it, who commissioned this beautiful, hollow lie, is sitting in the front row." I switched off the live stream. A profound, cleansing silence filled my workshop. It was not the dead silence of a broken machine, but the clean, peaceful silence of a restored truth. I filed for divorce. I didn't ask for any of his ill-gotten money. I only asked for the return of one thing: the dead, fraudulent watch. It arrived a week later in its rosewood box, a silent monument to his greed. I took it to my workbench, methodically disassembled it, and placed every single one of its lying, counterfeit parts into a crucible. I melted it down until it was nothing but a single, shapeless, ugly lump of gold and cheap brass. I had spent my life restoring time. But for him, I had made sure that time had finally, irrevocably, run out.